Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Book Review Blog. I am your book reviewer, and today we're going to review the book Eclipse by Stephenie Meyer. It is the third book in the Twilight series, and above all, my favorite. I'm glad that I was able to read this book, and I'm glad that I'm able to review it. And I get to tell you why it's my favorite along this review. So, it has the same characters as the Twilight saga has. Bella Swan, Edward Cullen, Jacob Black, and all of the other characters that were associated with the first two books. And it does bring new characters, which I'll explain. At the beginning of the book, it kind of goes along with the end of New Moon, where Bella tells Jacob that no matter how much she likes him, she'll always love Edward, she'll always be with Edward, and which kind of sends Jacob to leave unhappily. And also, the thing with Bella and Edward is that Bella wants Edward to change her into a vampire at the end of the second book, and through kind of a major compromising, they figure on after graduation, just so Bella can experience that human aspect of graduating. And Edward does have one more big request for Bella, and that is that she marries him. And so, technically they're engaged. They don't have a ring or anything, but because Bella is very against, not very against marriage, or marrying Edward, but just kind of against marriage in general. And that's kind of where this book starts. Jacob still is not talking to Bella, even though Bella is trying to get in touch with Jacob. Which is part that I didn't really like. Like, okay, he doesn't like you, and you've just kind of been leading him on, kind of, by liking Edward, but kind of liking him as well, so make up your mind, woman. And she always knows that she wants to be with Edward, but still kind of strings Jacob along, which I don't really like, but anyway. There's more of that in this book, and, one of the first things that happens in this book is that Edward, Bella, and Alice are having lunch, and with a couple of Bella's other friends, and Alice gets a vision, and Edward knows what it is, but he doesn't tell Bella what it is exactly, and so Edward takes this opportunity to remind Bella that she has plane tickets that were a gift from Carlisle and Esme for Bella and Edward to go visit Bella's mom, who lives in Jacksonville, Florida. And so Bella realizes, okay, might be the last time before graduation that I might see my mom. So she and Edward go to Jacksonville to see Bella's mom, and it's a nice little visit. And when they come back, Jacob, who all of a sudden comes back and talks to Bella and Edward, Jacob is very mad and starts to tell Edward that it was a rotten thing what his brother did, and Bella is very, very confused, and Jacob becomes smug all of a sudden because now he gets to break the news to Bella of what Alice saw in her vision, which was that Victoria is back in Forks and is looking for Bella. Victoria, again, who was James's mate, who James died in the first Twilight book. Again, if you've been living under a rock for so many years and don't know the Twilight story. Anyway, and so Bella is a little angry at Edward because Edward knew about this, but yet didn't want Bella to know and took her away. And what ended up happening was that both the vampires and the werewolves were looking for Victoria and were chasing after her. And Edward's brother Emmett had crossed over into the Quillette territory, which is the werewolf territory. Apparently werewolves and vampires, according to this treaty, cannot be in each other's land. And so, and it was just kind of a misunderstanding, and it kind of got resolved, and unfortunately Victoria wasn't captured. So, and it was kind of because of this that Victoria was able to slip past them. And so now Bella is all kind of worried because Victoria's back, and Edward keeps reassuring her that she's safe and that Alice is kind of looking in to see if she can tell what Victoria is going to do next. And also Alice is looking at what the Volturi will do, because Bella is afraid about this Volturi family. And so she's kind of Bella is just kind of not selfish exactly, but she's just worried about everybody else's safety, but not hers. And so what happens is that then they get reports from the news about mass killings and kind of mass destruction going on in Seattle, and Bella is unaware of it and doesn't know what they are and what's going on, but the Cullens are, and so what they end up being is a newborn vampire race that's been forming and causing major destruction, and they don't know, the Cullens aren't aware of why they're there and how they got formed and things like that. But this does kind of set a couple of times when Edward and the rest of the Cullens have to be away, but because to keep Bella safe, Bella is kind of like quote-unquote babysat by some Cullens, and the first time that she's babysat is by Alice, and who's in the Cullen, they're in the Cullen house, and Bella is just kind of sulky because she can't do anything, and she doesn't know about what Edward's doing. But while she's there is kind of an important thing that she does talk to Rosalie, and Rosalie ends up sharing with Bella her story of how Rosalie was turned into a vampire. And unfortunately, what you know about Rosalie is that she's just very hard and kind of stiff when it comes to Bella, and that she's just very mean to her. And she's like, I don't mean to be mean, but I always wonder why you're choosing this outcome for yourself. I didn't have a choice in the matter, and neither did any of my siblings, or really anybody that ever became a vampire really didn't have a choice in the matter. And you do, and this is what you're choosing. And so she ends up telling Bella her story about how she was beaten by her boyfriend at the time and kind of left for dead, and was found by Carlisle, and that's how he turned her into a vampire. And it was a very nice story. Just it had unfortunately an unhappy ending because she was hurt. But I really liked that part. That was one of my favorite parts in the book, and I was really glad that it made it into the movie. Because unfortunately, with a book, you never know what's going to make the movie and what's not. So, so when they begin to have to get word of these newborn vampire race, Jasper Cullen is an expert in dealing with newborns because he dealt with them when he became a vampire, which goes along, and he tells Bella his story about when he was a vampire, or when he became one, which Jasper is kind of the older one, not the oldest one, because that one's Carlisle, but Jasper is kind of the second oldest one, if you want to say it like that, where he was born in the 1800s, and he was a Confederate Army, in the Confederate Army in the Civil War. So, and it was during the Civil War where he was in Galveston, Texas, and he came across a small coven of vampires, unbeknownst to him at the time, but their leader was a woman named Maria, and she was the one who changed Jasper into a vampire, and Jasper joined the little coven and kind of became Maria's like go-to boy, or like second in command, where Maria and the other women would change change humans into vampires, and Jasper would try and train them. And according to him, newborn vampires are much stronger when they're newborn than when they kind of evolve or kind of grow into their vampire state. And so they're very strong, but they're very kind of disorganized, and they just kind of go for whatever. And so Jasper has all along his arms battle scars from the vampires biting him and trying to kill him. And this Jasper being Maria's kind of second in command is kind of foreshadowing for what's to come later, which I'll get into. And so that's that one end of that. And another part of this book that I really didn't like was the kind of feud between Bella, Jacob, and Edward. It was just kind of a three-ring circus, or kind of not a love triangle exactly, but Bella just couldn't break it to Jacob that she loved Edward, and Jacob knew that, but Jacob was always like, I can do so much better for you. I am, you don't have to change any part of you to be with me. He just couldn't take a hint, I guess. And there's a part where he tries to kiss Bella, and Bella ends up punching him, which, because in his werewolf state, he's very strong, and she ends up hurting herself. I think she like breaks her arm or something. And that's kind of, it's played down in the movie, but you can see it in the movie, and I'm also glad that made it there. But finally, at one point, Bella just like throws up her arms and says, don't fight over me. I'm Switzerland. I'm neutral, which, is to me kind of stupid to say, but there you have it. And another thing about these newborn vampires, according to Jasper, is that they need training to fight them, because there's a special way to do it, because they're going to go for like the obvious kill, so you have to defeat that and kill them in a different way. And luckily, because of Jasper's expertise, he holds like meetings where he trains the vampires and the werewolves, who are going to work hand in hand to defeat these newborn vampires. And one of the kind of during the week, I guess the couple of days before the newborns arrive, because Alice can see when the newborns are coming, again, it's another kind of quote-unquote babysitting trip for Bella, but it's more fun because it's just Bella and Edward, and Bella and Edward are alone in the house together. And before this happens, Bella has kind of a very awkward conversation with her dad, Charlie, where Charlie is convinced that Bella and Edward are like sexual, and Bella is like, no, and of course they're both very embarrassed, and she's like, no, and we're not that way. He's very nice, he's very traditional. And basically she just blurts out that she's a virgin. But that kind of gets Bella thinking about that type of thing. And so when she and Edward are alone, Bella tries to start like having sex with Edward, which Edward repels right away. And which it's just kind of funny to read it in the book, because Bella, they mentioned it later that the roles are kind of reversed, I guess, if you want to say it. Like, Bella's pushing Edward for sex, and Edward's like, no, I want to wait till we're married. And this is when he kind of officially proposes to her with an engagement ring, and she reluctantly agrees. And so she's like, this is now really happening. So I thought that was funny. So then it goes on and they are training again for this newborn attack, and one of the decisions that they make is to get Bella out of it completely, and they do this by taking Bella away to like a remote area for camping, and it's Bella and Edward are in the tent, and Jacob is outside of the tent, kind of patrolling the area and making sure that there's nobody there. And there's a snowstorm that happens, and Bella is very cold. And unfortunately, because Edward is very cold by nature, he can't, nuzzle up against her for body warmth. And, but Jacob is there, and Jacob kind of points out, hey, I'm warm, because, werewolves are warm naturally. And so he, again, very smugly, gets in the sleeping bag with Bella to keep Bella warm. And it's just, visually, it was just kind of funny to think of this in my head, where, Bella and Jacob are not nestled in a sleeping bag, but they're, very close together in a sleeping bag. And Edward is a couple feet away from them, fuming that he can't do this. And one of my favorite part in this little sub thing that unfortunately didn't make the movie was that the next day the storm is over and Bella is really hot because Jacob is next to her and has an increasingly high body temperature, and Edward is like, "Oh, you're hot. Let me help you with that." And he unzips the sleeping bag, and Jacob kind of falls out. Which was very funny. And so then the newborns come and they attack the Cullens, but because the Cullens knew they were coming, and B, with Jasper's lessons of dealing with them, the Cullens defeat the newborn vampires easily, and Victoria is not with them, and she and her right-hand man of the newborn vampires, who is a boy named Riley, go and find Bella and Edward instead of joining this newborn fight. And so Bella, Edward, and Victoria and Riley are there, and another werewolf whose name is Seth. And because Edward can read Riley's mind, Edward kind of convinces Riley that, basically based on Riley's thoughts about Victoria, that Victoria loves him, and Edward is like, "No, Riley, Victoria doesn't love you. She may say she does, but she doesn't. Her main love was James, who I ended up killing. You can save yourself, because if you die, Victoria really won't shed a tear." And Riley doesn't believe Edward, and Riley starts fighting with Seth, and Riley is end up killed, and like Edward said, Victoria doesn't really shed a tear, she doesn't really care. Her main focus is killing Bella. And so Edward and Victoria kind of circle around each other, and Edward ends up killing Victoria, and they go back to where the Cullens were fighting the newborns, and they're realizing that there's one newborn left, and it's a small girl whose name is Bree, and Carlisle and the other Cullens are telling Edward and Bella that this girl is harmless. She surrendered. She didn't want to fight, and we can kind of train her to be good and either join our pack or send her away. And they are interrupted at this point by the Volturi, who, like I said before, Alice was kind of looking for, but she didn't know that they were coming. And the Volturi are concerned about this newborn vampire that they have, and the Cullens are trying to convince them, no, she surrendered, and she is harmless. But the Volturi are like, no, we can't, our race can't grow, and especially in the way that these newborns were created, they have to be destroyed. And unfortunately, the Cullens have no say in the matter because the Volturi are like their law. So the Volturi end up destroying Bree, which is kind of where the book ends. And the only part that's left in the book is kind of funny because Bella and Edward realize that they need to, and so like the last part of the book is when they kind of heave a heavy sigh and go and tell Charlie about it. It's called Fire Named Bree. So that's it, and I bid you a farewell and happy reading.